Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this episode, I sit down with retail expert, fellow NRF top voice, and Rethink Retail top retail expert, Liza Amlani, to discuss her new book, The Wholesale, Profitable Wholesale Strategies for Brands. We explore retail fundamentals, wholesale growth strategies, brand partnerships, getting and keeping listings with retailers, merchandising strategies, and insider tips, and how direct-to-consumer brands can successfully scale into physical retail while maintaining profitability. Lisa, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast, my friend. How are you?
I am so good and very excited to be here. I've been listening to you for years, so this is a real treat for me.
Well, me as well. I mean, you and I have met a bunch of times. We're part of the TREE community, the top retail expert community. I think that's where that might have been where we first crossed paths, but I've been seeing you and watching your impressive career and what you're doing. And you're back in Toronto, I believe. Are you in Toronto today? You travel around a lot. So where are you? Where am I catching you today?
Well, I am in the 6th today. So I am in hometown.
Well, I think the last time I saw you was, I guess, the big show in New York, right? Where we were all together, somewhere, somehow, in and around the big city. But listen, as people would probably gather, you and I know each other, but they may not. So tell us about yourself and your background and who you are and what you do.
I am a former retailer. And I was a retail buyer and product creator for over 20 years. So I've worked with department stores like Holt Renfrew, Sporting Life, a few others, but really spent a lot of my career with brands. So worked with Club Monaco. I don't know if you remember the Caban stores.
Yeah, sure.
Back. So I was the apparel buyer for Caban. And then I worked also with Club Monaco. And then Ralph Lauren a number of times. My last industry role was with Ralph Lauren. I was based in London, and I was head of buying for the Lauren brand for UK, Ireland, Scandinavia, the Baltics, and sometimes France.
Wow. Now, what persuaded you to go out? Because you're on your own, you're helping people figure it, and we're here to talk about this great new book of yours. The Wholesale, which I just love the title, by the way.
Thank you.
Why I Want the Wholesale, anyway. So it starts off well because it's a great title. But I generally see two things happen. One, and it's funny, I was looking up at Canadian Tire, and there's someone there I work with at Hudson's Bay, and he's been buying a similar category for basically his entire career. He's a master at it. So there's lifetime merchants, and then there's people who kind of decide, I'm going to go out on my own, and there's lots of people who need help. Sometimes they're sitting on the other side of the desk with them and go, oh my God, I could really help you. How did you decide to I don't know, call it exit corporate life, but go out on your own and do this consulting work?
Well, I mean, in 2018, I actually moved back to Canada. So I'm British Canadian. I tend to move around a lot of back and forth. But when I did move back, Accenture hired me as their merchandising SME. And I worked, I guess, for most of those years with Accenture, a couple of years with this giant brand with a swoosh out of Beaverton. So I spent time there. And what I learned was there's a lot of help needed, not only from a brand point of view to be more efficient, but also from the consulting side. There weren't a lot of consultants in the space that really worked in retail. So in 2020, we started Retail Strategy Group and, of course, The Merchant Life, which is our newsletter. And today I'm a trusted retail executive advisor. So I work with brands and retailers on increasing profitability and improving organizational excellence, which could be improving product creation practices or learning how to scale their wholesale, which is what brought us here today. And I think as a Rethink Retail top expert like you and an NRF Retail voice, I think today is the perfect time to talk about this because there are so many brands out there looking for help because in many cases, as I'm sure you've seen, you have a runner or an athlete and they decide that, we love running, so we're going to open a store. Or there's brands out there that just have never sold to retailers and don't know where to begin or have never seen a line sheet before. So as a former buyer, I mean, I would always say, oh, if only I could teach you how to do this, then,
Right.
Our meetings would go much faster and,
Yeah.
I could actually plan my open to buys with a better forecast and all that sort of thing. So I think just working with a few DTC brands in the last few years, I just found there was a common theme that they were experts in their product or category. And they were missing retail fundamentals around selling into wholesale and getting retail ready. And they just didn't know what retail buyers were looking for.
Or the mechanism or how they work. That's one of the things I loved about the book as I was skimming through it. You show what a line sheet looks like. And it really takes me back into my retail career. I wasn't a buyer on the buying group, but I worked closely with them and just kind of sitting with them and understanding all the details that they were looking for. And we had the same situation. Sometimes we'd have celebrities or people who just had a great idea with a great product and say, how hard can this be? Yeah, I got a great product. You want to sell it, right? And then just, they walk out of those meetings with their head spinning and like, oh, so much work to do. And
it really is. And I think because there's an inconsistency out there in how brands are talking to buyers or what they're coming to the buyers with, I was like, there has to be a better way. And I couldn't find anything out there. So I was like, this is a great opportunity to teach brands, for under $20. This is how you talk to a retail buyer. This is what you need to do in terms of preparing. And this is how you stay on the shelf.
Yeah. I love that part. So let's get into the book. The book is called The Wholesale, and you have written it with a partner. Who's your partner?
My partner is Dr. Raj Daman. He is the president of Retail Strategy Group and my partner in work and life.
Oh, nice. Very good.
Yeah.
And so what was the genesis of the book? Or have you just described that basically? It's like, there's nothing like this. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like it. I've seen a few books, but nothing in that level of detail that would just really help people. Is that what, I always ask authors like yourself, what was that space on the shelf or virtual shelf or real shelf that you thought was unfilled, and why did you think there's opportunity? Is that what you were thinking, that you did your scan and there's just nothing like a handbook that people could come in and go?
There was nothing. And I think not only is this, a real, like a guide and something that that really you could keep forever, right?
Yeah.
To teach you how to improve your skills in not only negotiating, but also in preparing and again, staying on that shelf. But we didn't see anything out there like it. And in fact, I think it was last year in our newsletter, The Merchant Life, we wrote wholesaleisms. These are some key things and guidelines for brands that they can use them immediately. So when we wrote that newsletter, we had so many people reach out to us. And then that's when we started, kind of digging around. Okay, does anything like this exist? And the only thing I'd ever seen, because I teach on the side at FIT. So FIT does have a course on wholesale. But then, when I asked other schools, they also didn't have courses on wholesale. And a lot of the information out there is dated. So I thought, we sat down and we're like, we need to do this. So let's just write a quick ebook, give folks some tools that they can download and, get them talking to my people, my friends that are merchants in the right way.
Fantastic. Now, when you thought of that book, did you, because you talk about, the idea that there are DTC brands that have skewed wholesale because of the narrative that it was just better and faster and cheaper and just better to go direct to consumer, and the wholesale guys, that just adds cost and doesn't add any value. But you kind of eschew that right away and say, listen, it's not that straightforward. You can be successful, but it also means you've got to understand the dynamics. So when you had all these people reaching out to you, who did you write this in mind for? Is it the brand? Is it DTC that's already in retail, or all of the above?
So I would say it's for emerging brands, definitely. Brands that are looking to scale their distribution. Maybe they're already selling on marketplaces and want to, get on the shelves at Walmart or Target. But also, I would say it's also for early stage retail buyers, because then they can actually think about, okay, this is what I need to ask for from my DTC brand. This is how I should be analyzing sales and the KPIs that I should be looking for, especially as we start to see a lot more language around incorporating insights and customer feedback. There are a lot of great tips in the book to, what they should be asking for.
Is it your observation and your experience that brands who are methodical and follow basically your guidelines, which are the kind of merchant, let's call part of your book is merchandising 101. Here's how to finish. Like it's basically table stakes. But in my experience, there's a lot of brands and all they need to do is follow the table stakes and they'll be successful. But so few do. Like a good sales rep into a wholesaler, like a department store or retailer, can be very successful with a good brand, but if they honor the process and understand the process, they can last and grow the business, even with not okay product, but good product. And they can actually beat out people with, let's say, superior product or more differentiated product because they don't know the process. Is that as important as this becomes?
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And I think retail fundamentals and process and following the process, these are things that I think are not helping the brand win, right? Even before jumping into retail, we called it the wholesale conditions test. So, which retailers are your target customers shopping at? What retailers are your competitors in? And what retailers align with your brand DNA? Like, first ask yourselves, these three questions to better understand, is wholesale even something that you want to be in, right? And then in terms of merchandise being, almost the heart and soul of this, absolutely. I think from my own merchant life, I give a lot of examples of, where either merchandising did not play a role or where it did and how it was actually part of the success of the story. So, I talk a lot about building the right partnership, but I know we'll get into that, but it is really about thinking about the merchandising strategy, which is your product, your distribution, and your pricing, meaning what you sell, where you sell it, and what price point. And start with that and then start to think about where should you be in terms of the retailers or the distribution channels that are out there.
Yeah, let's talk about, you make some great points, and I don't want to assume that everybody kind of understands how the field gets chalked around direct to consumer. You're selling direct, whether it's online, and whether it's a catalog or whatever, versus a wholesale relationship. So what are the benefits that you outline, just so that people have a good understanding of how you think about there's pros and cons, and maybe it can be both. I want to explore that with you as well. But let's first talk about, I guess it's the not the fallacies or the misunderstanding that DTC is the solution for everything, but wholesale is also a bit misunderstood. So talk about that for a bit.
Yeah, when we think about wholesale, we think about that. The first thing that comes to mind is, we're going to lose margin, right? We're going to lose our profitability. Yeah. But that is a misconception, because when we think about what's involved in building a DTC brand, building out stores, marketing yourself, when you're selling to a retailer that not only aligns with your own brand values and your brand DNA, that retailer can not only help you grow and scale your brand, but it can help improve your product mix. It can, of course, help market towards a target customer that you might not have access to. And that's really, I would say, the foundation of wholesale is, getting onto that retailer's shelf and then staying there is really about maintaining that partnership and relationship with that retailer, because you want it to be long-term. You want to learn, you want to grow as the retailer grows. And that's where wholesale could really be, I would say, the fuel in scaling and growing a brand.
Now, I've been on the other side of the table with big brands, and sometimes the retailers, I love you all, but sometimes the retailers make decisions about how they and where they put your brand that you do not agree with.
Yes,
Now,
I
sometimes
agree.
they might, for example, use it. Okay, I'm going to pick your brand as the front page on the flyer, price fighter. And you're like, oh my God, don't do that because anybody else is carrying me now. You've killed the product for me.
Yeah.
Or, there's a myriad of sins that are done for a strategic reason, but the retailer, but they don't always work out so well for the brand. Talk about that in your experience.
Well, I would say negotiation is a key theme in the book. And one of the mistakes that I've seen being made many, many times, sitting on the other side as a retail buyer, is that the brand did not negotiate. Things like product placement or pricing or accountabilities from signage to markdowns and marketing. So, for example, it's really common for a retail buyer not to share their markdown strategy with a brand because either they might not know it or they don't generally share their promotional calendar. But this is something that if a brand does this right, especially at the start of the relationship or before even structuring the agreement, that they can actually help get ahead of promotional surprises and maybe negotiate a markdown cadence upfront. So possibly offer up higher margin product or exclusives for promotions so that the brand can better plan for drops in margin. And then product placement is another. It is a negotiable because if the brand does the research before meeting their buyer, comp shopping, as we'd love to call it, tell the retail buyer what your ideal adjacencies are, but also back it up with examples. Show them that you go into the stores, you go into their competitors, you see where like brands are placed. And, and I've seen this many times where if it's a new brand, we're going to put it in, the back corner of the third floor of the department. That's not where you want to be because you will not make as many sales or you won't be in front of the customer. So it is important for the brand to tell the buyer what the ideal adjacencies are, because really you're taking away some of the work that the retailer will have to do. And that's a win, right? It should be a win for both. And I think that's also an underlying theme of the book is that you want it to be a win-win, because if the brand sells through, then the retailer wins because they have profit and margin.
The one, I want to get your opinion on this. So I talk to a lot of brands and they say, I went to see retailer XYZ, and the retailer says, well, you're kind of new in the market. I always thought the paradox, the retailer's searching for something new and innovative. But sometimes when brands say, I've got something new and innovative, and they're like, well, let's test it online first.
Oh, yes.
Which in some cases is a place where great ideas go to die. I mean, it's very hard to get discovered online, and there's just millions of products. What's your opinion on that? Is that a good strategy for a brand to accept that trade-off? Because the retailer says, listen, I want to see some performance before I put you on my shelf because the shelf's very crowded. So let's see how you do online first. And I don't know, does that work out?
I think determining whether online means marketplace or does it mean online, because there is a distinction there, right? I've worked with many brands that, in order to get into Walmart, they have to start in marketplace.
Right.
And that can be a tough pill to swallow for a lot of brands, but I think that it's still, the barrier to entry kind of reduces.
Sure.
If you can get into marketplace. I don't think marketplace is a bad thing.
But it makes the brand, the first part of the conversation is let's start you in marketplace. The second part is, by the way, you can top up and advertise on my marketplace to your brand.
Exactly.
And it's not a listing fee, but if you actually want to be seen, this retail media, you and I have been talking about it for years.
Yeah.
Listen, retail media is hey, listen, you can get on the marketplace and you'll be lost amongst the million products unless you do the following things. Do you buy that logic that they should, okay, I'm going to go on your marketplace, but I'm going to top up a little bit. I'm going to promote.
Yeah. I don't always. I think it depends on the retailer. It depends on the brand category, what their assortment is and what their distribution is today. So if it's going to I mean, you can negotiate everything, right? And I think that that's the critical thing here. And if one retailer has crazy fees to even get you seen, then there are options to go to other retailers. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it really just depends if, again, when you're comp shopping, if that category that you sell into is saturated, maybe, think twice about that.
Yeah.
But if a brand like yours and a product mix like yours does not exist in that online retailer or that marketplace or that distribution channel,
could be a win for you, right?
It could be worth it. Yeah.
I know the retailers are working hard to drive audience to their marketplaces, right? I mean, again, it is a form of partnership, and the advantage is the barriers are fairly low. I think sometimes a little too low. I'll just go on here and then nothing happens. Like, it takes a lot of work. To make anything happen, for everybody to make anything happen. I want to take a step back for a second, because you're using a phrase that I'm not sure is uniformly understood: markdown strategies. And I want you to unpack from a merchant perspective how markdown, not because we could spend hours on it, but as a merchant, you kind of have markdown dollars.
Yes.
And explain that for a little bit, because I think it's certainly amongst new brands, it's like, what is this markdown? Is that just a deal? How does markdown dollars work? If you could explain it, I don't know, maybe that's part 2 of the podcast, but if you could explain it in a minute or two, what markdown dollars are from a buyer's perspective and how they're used.
Sure. So from a buyer's perspective, we have an open to buy that we work with in order to buy the products that we want to sell for the season.
So you are allocated, you're a buyer, you say you're open to buy is $1 million.
It's like my bank, right?
Right. Like your credit card.
Exactly. So once I buy the product that I want, during the, I would say, in-season plan, you're going to have promotional events like Mother's Day, like back to school, like Black Friday or Boxing Day, or even Christmas markdowns, right? So these are events that you want to plan for. And in most cases, you have a good sense of what those promotions will look like. And you want to make sure as a buyer, you have enough product to fulfill the needs of the customer who is planning to buy during these promotional events. So that's promotions 101.
Yeah. And your intent there is, say, I used to sell for $49.99 and I'd sell 10 units. I'm going to sell for $39.99 and sell enough units to make up for that difference and more.
Exactly. Yes. And all of that is tied to your margin plan. So at the end of the season, what margin are you going to end the season with once you've sold all of your product, balancing full price and balancing promotional product?
Now, when you say margin, some famous saying from merchants is, you don't take percentages to the bank. When you say margin, you mean cash.
I mean cash, yes. So it's your profit, right? That's what that is. Mm-hmm. Now, during the season, often there are times where a buyer has to plan for, let's say, a promotional event that they didn't buy for, right? And in many cases, the buyer will ask the brand for markdown dollars to support that markdown, so that at the end of the season, the retailer will still make that profit because they're not the ones paying for that markdown. Meaning the price of that markdown, like let's say they're losing $10 because the promotion is save $10 on this product,
aka discount.
Yes. The brand will pay for that versus the retailer. So that's what markdown dollars is. And when a brand is in the negotiation room up front, you want to make sure that you avoid paying for those markdowns, because that can really hurt a brand, right?
Interesting. So is your recommendation that a brand would go in knowing this, they would say, I'm going to sell you this item at $1. You're going to sell it for $1.50. And we're going to sell X number of units. And here's a bunch of units. And then I'm going to give you markdown dollars in advance, or you say you're going to have to come to me for markdown dollars, or you just want to avoid that conversation until it happens. And
I don't think it should be avoided. I think that the brand should have a good idea of what promotional activities their retailer is planning on holding for the season.
And not everything works, right? I mean, sometimes if you list 10 items, one, despite everybody trying their best, one's a slower mover than the other, right? Maybe a competitor came out or whatever. So you're going to have to, is that a case where you say, listen, I should reserve some dollars because I don't know which of the 10 it's going to be, but I'm probably going to have to help the retailer move some excess items. Is that kind of?
I would say that most of those negotiations are done up front. So it shouldn't come to a surprise, like a surprise to the brand, that the retailer will suddenly come to them and ask them for markdown dollars.
Right.
Now, depending on the reputation of that retailer, there's a lot of research you can do as a brand before you go into that retailer on various websites, even asking other brands, how has it been to work with that retailer? Do they come to you with any surprises, such as paying for markdowns or marketing or anything? Yeah. And I think that's also part of comp shopping. When you are looking to approach a retailer, when you're doing that comp shopping and looking for not only like-minded brands that are selling similar to your product, but also, is that retailer always on sale? Does that retailer have a lot of excess inventory? These are clues for you that this retailer might not be for you.
Is that retailer paying on time? I mean, that's a trade-off, right?
That is,
certain retailers who are now starting to stretch out their payment terms. They can move some volume for you, but there could be 60, 90. Like, what are you hearing about, the average payment terms these days? They seem to be longer than shorter, no?
I think it depends on the retailer. Some retailers are on time and they have different payment terms with different brands. Like they're not all the same. It's not standardized. I would say. I've
heard smaller brands. I had on another podcast I do with Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor. We were talking to Par Bank from Loblaws, and he said, I've struck a team. We were talking about how, again, back to this paradox, how small, innovative brands who don't have a lot of money still need to be on the shelf, but they need to get paid much sooner than a big packaged goods firm, right? That, and he's trying to strike a balance or even strike a task force that says, listen, we need to treat these sets of new brands fast or kill them in the cradle kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And we're seeing a lot more of that flexibility from the retail side, where the retail buyer, they want newness, they want innovative product, they want to entice the customer to buy from them because they have the most interesting and relevant product assortment. But that means you might have to pay upfront. That means you might have to pay 50% of that invoice upfront before that brand can ship. And this is all part of negotiations. And this is where, I tell a brand that you should absolutely negotiate, because retailers are more flexible than we think they are.
I'm going to turn our for last minutes together. This has been great, by the way, and I'm going to get you to tell us where and how to get the book and how to get in touch with you a bit later. But let's turn our minds to advice. So basically, this whole conversation has been advice. So it's kind of an easy wrap up question. But I want to frame it to you in 2 starts and 1 stop. On the brand side, you're sitting across the table, you're talking to or proposing a merchant like you're used to sit in that chair. 2 things brands should start doing, and 1 thing they should never or stop doing from your experience.
Okay. So I would say the first thing, this is the most important thing, build a partnership and that long-term relationship with the retail buyer. This will help the brand succeed and increase sales. So that means partner on merchandising execution. So ask the buyer to share seasonal strategy and what's important to their customer, and ask if you can help to visually merchandise your brand. Product knowledge, I would say, is very, very important. Whether it is product knowledge sessions for the retailer and their staff, or if it's store visits frequent store visits, so spending time with sales associates and providing personalized product and styling training. But this will help keep your brand top of mind. So I think that's all about, I would say, partnership and long-term relationship.
And your idea then is to, like, it's my first meeting. I've never met the buyer. They've never met me. I'm introducing my product. And your advice, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but your advice is like, I want to talk about these things in you probably have 15 minutes. You don't have a long time introduction meeting. But I want to say, listen, I want to work with you on these things. And would you take that as a signal from across the table? This could be a great vendor. Is that
yes,
your idea?
Absolutely. And I think that's also part of, being retail ready, right? Making sure you're prepared.
Love that phrase.
And then the second thing I would say is keep evolving your product assortment. So whether it's about monitoring cross-channel performance, tracking sales, returns, product feedback, promotional activity by channel with every partner, because that could help you get ahead of any markdowns or reduction in open to buy when it comes to buying your brand next season. It also demonstrates the commitment to a long-term partnership, again, bringing that partnership back. If you're openly sharing product performance, because if maybe one of your products is not selling at one retailer, but it's selling really well at another, you might want to share this information with the retail buyer you're looking to build that long-term partnership with.
And you can do that. And you can do that in a way that says, "Hey, you know what? This is performing better at some of my other partners, so maybe something we're not doing right here." That kind of phrasing, right?
Yep. And then you can also offer to switch things up. If something is not working in the first few weeks, then you can say, "You know what? I'd actually like to switch this up with a different product, because while I was talking to your sales associates, I also spoke to your customers. And this is that they would prefer, I don't know, leggings with pockets versus leggings without pockets."
Just the way it is. And what's the biggest thing? What's the biggest? Stop doing this thing. I see it all the time, and you should just stop doing this. It's not necessarily bad, but it's just not going to work.
I think stop thinking that, your brand is going to sell itself. I think it takes time. It takes effort. It takes that partnership, and more supply does not equal more demand. So the more product you throw at the retailer, it doesn't mean it's going to sell. You need to invest in building that relationship and visit stores and talk to the retail buyers and talk to the sales associates and the customers, because all of that will only help, let's say, curate a better product assortment. And when you're sharing these insights, it shows the retailer that you're in and fully in. So I think you can't expect your brand to sell itself. You have to put the work in.
Excellent. So the book is The Wholesale, Profitable Wholesale Strategies for Brands. How do we get a hold of the book? How do we get a hold of you and give us some 411?
Yeah. So you can find the book on Amazon globally. It's called The Wholesale. So that's 3 words. You can also find it on our website, Retail Strategy Group, or you can even contact us directly on LinkedIn, my email, or of course, the Merchant Life as well. And then I think just, I'd love to leave you with one thing, which is in order to get retail ready, I think DTC brands have to do their homework and come prepared. And the wholesale toolkit in the book is going to get them retail ready to make it easy for that retail buyer to say yes.
Well, I can hardly recommend the book. I had the chance to go through it, and it's a great, manual, both 101 and 401 for any brands. They would do well by following and reading this book. So I highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. This is a first. You and I have talked quite a bit, but it's such a treat to get you on the mic, and congratulations on what you accomplished. And I wish you continued success. Thank you so much. This was great. I truly enjoyed the conversation. I think we could probably talk for longer. I think there's a part 2. I definitely think there's a part 2. I know. Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.